Hello, this is Cathy Cassidy and this is your regular Sunday book club with me. And yeah, I thought, it's summer, it's July, we're sitting in the garden, so I've had to bring an umbrella out because it's so wet. It's just like sunny and then little downpours, so we'll see how much we can get done in spite of the rain, because today I wanted to do special shout outs for a couple of people. They are for some people who've just joined in with the Sunday Book Club, so just saying hi to welcome you. Sophie and Daisy and Anusha from India and Rochelle from the Philippines, and also a very for Eve, a special shout out for Eve, who has had a birthday quite recently, so hope it was pretty awesome one, Eve. And to lovely Poppy, who actually has a birthday today, which is very cool, so I really hope it's going to be awesome for you, Poppy. So we had a couple of questions that I wanted to get through, and if I can manage to do that without drowning in the drizzle. Let's see. First question was from Francesca, who wanted to know really whether I liked sci-fi or fantasy books when I was a child or a teenager when I was growing up. And the answer is I really did, even though nowadays I wouldn't really read that genre particularly, but I managed to pick out a couple of books from my bookshelf. And if I show you these two books, okay, they are called The Owl Service by Alan Garner and The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. A lot of you will be familiar with, part of the Narnia series. Well, these look as though they've been my books forever and ever, but actually they haven't, because when I was a child and teenager, pretty much all of my books came from libraries. So I read widely, I read a lot, and I read across all sorts of genres. I did read a lot of fantasy, a lot of sci-fi, especially as a teen, and really loved those things. And then, because I think, as some of you might know, I'm really keen on vintage, in adult life, I've kind of made it my business to try and track down second-hand copies of the books that I loved so much when I was a kid. But these two are awesome. If anybody out there watching does like a bit of fantasy at all, The Owl Service is fantastic. It's part of a series. It's got a bit of a Celtic theme to it as well, so you can imagine I would enjoy it. Definitely recommend. And Alan Garner has written a lot of fantastic books along those lines. And of course C.S. Lewis, a lot of us know The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe and all of that series. Fantasy, fantastic, and highly recommended. So that is Francesca's question, and it sort of links a little bit to Hilary's, because Hilary was interested in the background themes in my book Scarlet, which I was reading chapters of for you recently on this YouTube channel. And Hilary wanted to know whether there were any books that I could recommend that would help her find out a little bit more about those myths and legends. And I've got tons and tons of books that fall into that category really on our bookshelves. The one that I think has been the most important to me is just, yeah, a little kind of penguin classic, Early Irish Myths and Legends, which has the oldest versions of those stories, of those myths, and it's kind of where I started from, if that makes sense. So I read this and then everything else kind of followed on. And there are the most amazing books out there, Hilary, or anybody else who might be interested. One that I've referred to a lot over the last few decades has been Women in Celtic Myth. And to me, looking at those myths and legends, I don't stick solely to Irish, although of course in the story Scarlet it made sense if the myths and legends being referenced were Irish, because the book was set there, so it kind of made perfect sense. But the Celtic myths and legends kind of go right across the whole Celtic world. So You know, it could be Scottish or Welsh. The Mabinogion has the most amazing stories for you to look at if you're interested in that kind of thing, and Irish, of course, and then even things like Cornish and Breton stories too. And this is a fantastic book too, From the Isles of Dream, which is kind of pieces selected by John Matthews, and is very inspiring, very beautiful. And last but not least, this is probably the newest of them, and it's kind of a retelling of folk tales of Britain and Ireland, and it's called Between the Worlds. It's by Kevin Crossley Holland, who is pretty much a real authority and totally awesome author and storyteller too. So this book, 100% recommend. It's got just about everything that you might like in it. Very inspiring if you do love those ancient stories. So there we go. Hope it's not going to get too wet outside, because this little shower has turned into something slightly different now. But hey, this is life. This is summer in Britain. You have to get used to it. So the next question is actually from Eve, or Marie and Eve, I know, is in year 6 at school, and she's been really worried and anxious about going to secondary school in September. And I think part of that is because of the whole lockdown thing. The lockdown doesn't really help, does it? You're supposed to have transition days, you're supposed to have opportunities to say goodbye to your friends and say goodbye properly to primary school, and that doesn't really happen because of lockdown for all but a few of us. So some people may be getting a little chance at that, but not the way that you normally would. Yeah, and I think my normal reaction to that would be see it as an opportunity, see it as a new start. And then I thought, actually, there are a couple of other things I could tell you, Eve. One is this book, Gingersnaps, one of my standalone stories. It's a story that's mainly set in school, and it's about a girl who's been picked on a little bit in primary and how she makes a brand new start in secondary school. Of all of the books that I've written, this one probably is the most like a school story, because most of the action takes place in school, and it's about friendships and how things kind of work, and how good friends can be a lifeline, and friends who are a little bit not so perfect can also cause a lot of trouble. So an interesting novel for anyone moving on up to secondary school soon. But the other thing that I found, this is not going to mean anything to you, look, this is my old English book from when I moved to secondary school. And the second thing in it, in this book, 7th of September 1970, and it's all blurred, but I think it was 73. It says, "My impressions of secondary school." So I'm going to read it to you, and you can actually hear from the 11-year-old me who didn't really know what was going on at all. So I wrote, "I am a new pupil at Ullathorne School, and I think I'm going to like it, but I'm not sure yet. The dinners here are horrible, and I hate them so much that now I take sandwiches and a drink. The school is very big, and it is divided into 3 buildings. When you are changing lessons, you need to do a lot of moving about. I've made lots of new friends here, as there are so many pupils. Most of the teachers are also very nice. The lessons here are much harder than in primary school, but they are all interesting, although I don't like general science very much. Also here you get a lot of homework, but it usually is things that I like doing. I still don't know if I like the uniform yet, because at our old school we did not have to wear uniform. I travel by coach to and from school, and all my friends go by bus except for Rebecca, and she sits by me on the coach." So that's that just really made me smile, because I was looking for something that I could read and say to you, Eve, about starting a new school, and that just kind of came to hand. And it's like, I don't remember seeing that in years and years and years, but there you go, right from the horse's mouth, if that makes sense. The other thing I think might be helpful is, I'm going to read you a tiny bit from this. It's a book called Letters to Cathy. And I don't know if any of you will know, but in the past, in the start of my career, I worked for magazines. I'll talk a bit more about that another day on the Sunday Book Club. But I also ended up being an agony aunt for a long time. And you know, an agony aunt is a person who answers the questions and the problems that readers send in to a magazine. So quite an interesting and important job, really. Ooh, I love this. This is yeah. Why am I outdoors? Not a good plan. So when I became a novelist, in the age of the internet, lots and lots of readers would write to me, would email me, would message me, send me letters, all sorts. Sometimes they would share their problems with me, and it ended up so that I ended up getting more letters asking for help with problems of things going on in my readers' lives than I ever did in all of the time that I was an agony aunt. And that seemed crazy, and I was thinking, when I was an agony aunt, I used to say to the magazine that I worked for, maybe, you know, should I just do a book trying to troubleshoot and answer all these issues, because maybe it would help people, and then they wouldn't have to write to the magazine. And they said, oh no, and probably publishers wouldn't have wanted it anyway, because who was I? Just some kind of random agony aunt, and why would anyone want to publish a book that I'd written then when I'd never published anything else? But then I became a novelist. I began writing books for children and young teens, and became a bestseller at certain points. And then when I went to my publisher and said, could I write a book for kids who are struggling, maybe helping them with some of the problems they come through in their lives, and we came up with the idea of Letters to Cathy, and it was using letters that had been sent to me, but changing the name slightly from the girls and the boys who had written in, and yeah, using them as a framework really to kind of work through lots of problems and try and help people to be prepared. So one of the chapters, chapter 4, is about school, and it starts off all about anxiety in starting a new school. So I'll just read you a little bit from it, and there are 2 questions from readers. So it says, school days are the best days of your life. Right. Whoever thought up that little phrase clearly hasn't been inside a classroom for some time. School can be cool, but more often it can be plain hard work, and not just in class either. Unless you happen to be home educated, the chances are that you spend most of your time at school, and if you're not happy there, that has got to be a problem. So how can you sort your school hassles and learn to take it all in your stride? So here are the 2 questions. One says, hi Cathy, I'm starting high school after the summer, and I can't help thinking the worst, even though I try not to. I really love primary school, but I'm worried I will be out of my depth at secondary. From Jackie, aged 11. And the second letter says, dear Cathy, do you have any advice on going to comprehensive school? I'm going into year 7 and I'm really scared. My friends will be going to the same one, but we won't know which forms we're in until the first day back. What if they split us up? The more I think about my new school, the more upset I get. And that's from Ellis, age 11. So this is what I wrote in response to that. I said, changing schools is a big milestone. It can feel like the end of childhood, and saying goodbye to primary school is often a very emotional time. Jackie has to change her attitude to secondary school and start seeing the pros rather than the cons. Starting high school is a new beginning, and that has got to be a good thing. A fresh start is something to look forward to. New friends, new teachers, new subjects, and lots of new opportunities. Okay, the school campus will almost certainly be bigger, and you may get lost a few times in the first week, but every year 7 or S1 if you're in Scotland will have the same problem. The first few days are bound to be confusing, but trust me, pretty soon you will know where you're going. Another big change is adjusting to being the youngest and the smallest in the school again after a year of being a cool, confident year 6 or P7 maybe if you've been in Scotland. It's kind of daunting to be the new kid in a crispy new uniform and shiny shoes, surrounded by gruff, towering lads and curvy grown-up girls in lip gloss and eyeliner. Don't be scared of the older kids though. They may look pretty sus, but they are still kids underneath. Most will take the time out to help you if you get lost or have a problem, and sometimes the scariest looking kids can be the kindest. Everybody feels a little out of depth at secondary school, but this feeling rarely lasts for more than a few days. Jackie can make things easier for herself by listing the things she's looking forward to about switching schools. Making new mates, discovering new subjects and inspiring new teachers, cool after school and lunchtime clubs, and also just being treated as more grown up and independent. These are all definite plus points. If she catches herself thinking negative thoughts, she can banish them by repeating the list of things to look forward to. And by the time term starts, she will be raring to go. Ellis too is letting fears cloud her mind and spoil her summer. There are no guarantees that you'll be put in a form with your friends, but most secondary schools will do their very best to keep you together. If you are split up, try to see it as a bonus. You will soon make mates in your new form group and yet be able to meet up with your old friends at break and lunchtime. When I started high school, my 3 best friends from primary all went to different schools. Unlucky. I was quite anxious that first day and ended up sitting in a seat by myself, feeling really self-conscious. A few minutes into form time, there was a knock on the door and a new girl appeared. Her name hadn't been on the form lists, but she was part of our class. She looked around, scoping out the empty desks, and opted to sit by me. Jenny came from a different school and didn't know anyone at all either, but she quickly became my new best friend. Pretty soon we found ourselves part of a close-knit group of 6, none of whom had known each other in primary school at all. We were all very different, and maybe we wouldn't have looked like the ideal friendship group, but we bonded and we stayed close all the way through high school. If Jackie and Ellis stop dwelling on fears and negative thoughts, they will soon start to see secondary as the cool new start it really is. Sorted. So yeah, that was my advice from Letters to Cathy, and generally speaking, it's positive, practical advice on school, on friendship, on family, on boys, on all sorts of everything that might be causing you problems as you grow up. And it's, of course, it's still in print, so a good kind of go-to book on the shelf for anybody struggling at all. And just as a very last comment on that, Jenny and some of the rest of that friendship group are still, is still a really good friend. I'm in touch with most of them still, and that is lovely. So even though I've moved around the UK tons, and they have too, we've managed to stay in touch all these years later. So I think those friendships that you make at secondary can really be super cool. So yeah, I'm just going to say goodbye, sitting here very soggy. My lovely paper parasol that inspired the parasol in Cherry Crush and inspired a lot of the character of Cherry is probably getting a little bit damaged, a little bit soggy now, so I'm going to take it in and dry it out. All the books are a bit wet too. What a great summer we're having. Well, I hope that whenever this Sunday Book Club episode goes out, the sun has decided to shine a bit more. And next time, I think I'm gonna give you some summary ideas for stuff to make and do to help your summer go with a bang, even if it's drizzly and horrible, even if we're still in lockdown, no matter what. Tons of ideas in this book, so that's what we'll be doing next week. And don't forget to leave your questions, your comments, anything you think you'd like me to cover in future episodes. And I'm just going to say goodbye, and I'm going to run inside and try and dry out. But take care, keep smiling, and I'll see you next Sunday.